Stick and move, Becky. Stick and move. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another 90-day recap in which today's video we are going to be featuring Elizabeth and Andre. And hey, if you are new to my channel, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button and become part of the family because as I always say, there is room in the suite. And we would so love to have you. So, were you there for it? Were you there for the WWE inspired Battle Royale? Because I was. Now look, we are not here to glorify violence of any nature. But what we saw in last night's episode was the pinnacle moment of being just over it. And I was here for it. I sure was. I was here for it all. I think I watched the clip of those scenes probably 2 or 3 times. Because I wanted to make sure I got all of the details of everything that was said and everything that was going on. Because there was a lot said. A lot of looks, a lot of glares, a lot going on in the great city of Tampa, Florida. Yeah. So basically, we should just go right on in and start from the beginning, right? So in last night's episode, we are picking back up with Elizabeth and Andre during a car ride to a meeting of where we don't know exactly where they're going. But we do know that they are meeting up with someone or someones. And I bet you can guess who those someones are. You see, if you recall, Andre and Elizabeth had taken a wonderful trip to the Grand Canyon in Arizona and decided to provide the announcement of their pending bundle of joy to both just their fathers. You heard that right, just their fathers. Now, we all know that Elizabeth has a huge family, and Andre has quite a few family members and friends as well. I mean, we have seen in many opportunities in past seasons where family members that were not physically located in the area of where the individuals were would Skype or video call or use some kind of form of messaging to let them know what's going on. Now, we don't know behind the scenes whether or not Andre's already told the rest of his family or not. We're only privy to what's going on with Elizabeth's family. Remember, in this case also, as it was in the Angela and Michael saga, the chickens are coming home to roost. So yeah, they are driving, Elizabeth and Andre, to the location because they have been back from Arizona for a few days now. And yeah, they still hadn't heard anything from the rest of the family, in particular the sisters and her mother, about the pending bundle of joy news that was splattered all over Instagram. Mind you, was splattered all over Instagram prior to them taking the time to actually tell them about these wonderful news. And Elizabeth is wondering, wow, they still hadn't contacted me. Are we surprised? So Elizabeth thinks it's a good idea to, check the temperature of Andre because, Andre's always running hot. I don't know why this would be any different. But there it is. She basically wants to see where his head is at, how he's feeling. Andre, in the same fashion as he mostly does, says that, look, if you're looking for an opportunity to try to rekindle and resolve things, that's great. We'll just try one more time. And it's kind of funny how he tells her we're just going to try one more time with her and her family, as if she really doesn't have any kind of say in this conversation. Now, again, we don't have previewed information that is not in front of the cameras to know what kind of conversations are happening in the background. All we can go with is what's going on and what we're seeing in front of us. So it would be a great assumption to make, I think a safe one in this point, that Andre is steering this ship, as he most of the time does. Yeah. So, Libby's putting on her lipstick, fixing her hair, maybe just kind of listening to things going through one ear and out the other, maybe, I don't know. But Andre basically says, at this point, I just see them as buffoons. So we'll try it. We'll have this talk. I'll be there to support you just because. But we're only doing this one more time. That's the message I heard anyways. This is the last time. So, of course, Elizabeth says, hey, look, I don't know how the sisters are going to be. I don't know how they're going to react or what they're going to say during this conversation. Because, see, the reason why Elizabeth and Andre are driving to whereabouts unknown is that the sisters actually gave Libby a call and said, hey, we would like to meet up. Now, just hover over that for a minute. The sisters called Elizabeth and said, hey, we would like to meet up. This will be important for us to remember as we go along further in this debacle of a meeting. So, Andre is fired up as usual. And, she says, look, she being Elizabeth, we're just going to try to see how things go and, basically just go from there. So that's great. So now we are at the meeting place. Looks like one of those little restaurants you can eat outside. Florida has lots of them. I used to live in Florida for many years myself, and it's always fun and relaxing to do that. Never went to one of those types of restaurants where the beach is there or, just the fun times are there and I'm going to have to do a confrontation with anybody. But hey, it's as good a place as any. Fresh air and all. So Elizabeth and Andre, they get to this little restaurant first, and they go ahead and have a seat at the table as they are waiting for both the sisters to arrive. And about a couple of minutes later, the sisters do arrive. Now, I had to rewatch this entire scene here, and the reason being is because when Becky and Jen arrived to the restaurant, I believe I heard Becky say hello, and then I didn't hear anything else. So I thought, well, how rude is that? She says hello out to everybody and no one says anything back. So when I did a playback, I saw that actually Elizabeth did wave a little bit as they were approaching the table. So I was like, okay, good. I can appreciate that. I mean, I'm not really concerned about Andre's reaction or saying much of anything because we already know what time it is with him. So, my focus was more on the sisters. So as they sit down, or let me not miss this part because this was so funny. As both Becky and Jen are approaching the table, Becky has this huge, I think, German Shepherd dog with her. And I don't think I've ever seen her bring a pet before to any kind of outing or events. And maybe they just didn't show it. But it just kind of flashed back me to a scene in, New Jack? Yeah, New Jack City, a movie from the 90s for those who may not know. And Nino Brown, one of the main characters, whenever he would go to meetings or anything else, he would bring his Rottweilers with him. And I don't know why, but that just flashed back to me in that moment because it just really felt like all we needed was a theme song to their entrance. Because look, Becky is not playing around, okay? She's just not playing around. So after Becky and Jen Becky says hello, Becky and Jen both sit down. Dog seems to go out of sight at this point. And this is important to remember. Just hold on. So, Jen, opening up the awkward conversation, says, to Elizabeth, hey, so what did you order? And Elizabeth said, I don't know, some kind of banana chocolate with dates type of thing. Jen says, oh, okay. As Becky is kind of just looking at her, probably trying to get her thoughts together, probably trying to see how I'm going to actually present what I'm here to talk about without losing my total you-know-what. So the awkward silence is then broken by the sounds of the brute, Andre, who basically says, so what do we owe this invitation from you? Now, you remember when I said to hold on to the fact that Elizabeth shared that the sisters contacted her for this meeting. Are you kind of following me? So Jen claps back real quick and says, well, I don't recall inviting you. And Becky chimes in and says, yeah, I didn't realize you were even going to be here. You see, because this was supposed to be a conversation for just the sisters, not for the sisters and the bodyguard. Now, clearly, Elizabeth has known her sisters ever since she was born, since she's the youngest, I believe. There's not anything her sisters are going to do to her to where she could not go to this meeting by herself without Andrei's chiming in. So things are already not getting off onto the right foot. But Andrei shares, you know what? Well, I just felt that it would be one of those things where I did not feel comfortable, basically, right? That's what he's saying. He didn't feel comfortable. And he didn't want to leave his wife alone. And so the sisters laugh and say, oh, yeah, of course we don't want to leave her alone with strangers, you know, her sisters, everything. That would be such a scary thing to do. So, yes, this sit down isn't going very well. So we just get right off to the races. So in Andrei's predictable frustration, he says to the sisters, look, are you going to congratulate Elizabeth, or are you going to just keep doing this? And so Becky and Jen laughed again and said, oh, is that what you thought we were going to do today? You thought we were going to set up this meeting so we can congratulate you? Is that what you thought? Then, of course, we cut to the confessional for Becky, who basically says, you know, I don't really know what is going on with Elizabeth. It's like she's drifting off into the abyss. You know, for her to share such an important announcement on social media without telling any of the family members prior to doing so, well, she's hurt, naturally. She is hurt, and the family is hurt. So it does seem to be kind of odd that they would expect that they would just come and congratulate them. They hadn't done it in the last few days, so what would you think was going to happen now? So, of course, Elizabeth seems, I don't know, mostly mute, I guess, during this conversation. Or maybe it's just that we couldn't get a good camera angle at her, because the conversation quickly went to just the conversation between Andrei and Jen and Becky. So they're going back and forth. Andrei starts spitting out stuff about how jealous Becky is of her, and just all kinds of random dumping of information that seems not at all relevant to what's going on. So Becky is really confused as to what is going on here, and she simply asks him, or yells at him, you know, why are you so angry? What is your actual problem here? And so Andrei starts to spill that, well, his issue is, in his very yelling voice, and I'm not going to do that because, you know, I'm still trying to recover here with my voice as it is. So he basically just says, you know, you guys are followers and you basically turned your back on me. How on earth did Elizabeth's sisters turn their backs on Andrei? Well, because they had the nerve to go to their mother's birthday lunch with Charlie there, after they had agreed with Elizabeth they were not going to go. So the bottom line is they had a change of heart. And I don't think that that was something they needed to run by Elizabeth, because this is also their mother. And what they choose to do with their mother and their relationship with their mother has got nothing to do with Andrei, for sure. So Becky says, okay, so you're upset about that. What does your issue with my mother and Charlie have to do with me? It's a very good question. And then Andrei again then starts spewing out other random things. One of which he says, you know, hey, I made $750. And I don't know if it was $750,000, $750 million, $750, don't know. But he spouts out, I made $750, because I think Becky might have said something to the fact that he was a loser. And so he wanted to make sure to let her know, oh, I'm not any of those things because I made this kind of money, and you are broke and a loser yourself. Then he starts spouting off about the fact that the car that she has is paid by the father. And again, I'm sitting here in this conversation trying to understand, what does any of that have to do with today? But then, of course, my question also then turns into the statement of, I don't recall Becky and Jen inviting Andre to this conversation in the first place. And so you're wondering what Elizabeth is doing, right? I don't know. Watching it all unfold. Watching Andre continue to insult and degrade her sisters right in front of her. Because that's what we do with family. Yes, that's what we do with family. So of course, Becky shares in her confessionals that not only does it seem like Elizabeth is off to the abyss, that she's being somewhat controlled by Andre. I mean, isn't that obvious? Right? I mean, this is what she asked. Because she felt that that Instagram post was not about her sister. She doesn't think her sister would have done that, didn't really want to do that. She thinks that, she did that because that was Andre's wishes. I'm starting to wonder if that's 100% true, to be honest with you. I feel that Elizabeth is truly a full-fledged willing participant in this buffoonery. Yes. As the yelling and confrontational talk continues between Andre, Becky, and Jen, we're really not covering anything that I think Becky and Jen wanted to talk about in the first place. But with all the yelling and screaming, Becky had enough. Because Jen had put her hand out there and said, look, I'm not dealing with this because you were on a whole nother level. Because it was just insult, berate after berate, and it was just, after a while, it just becomes spewing out so much. There's not really much you can do with it. It's nonsensical. It's not effective to what they were there for, and they didn't even ask them to be there in the first place. So why am I even giving you the time of day? But Andre continues on with his berating, and Becky snapped because she had enough. She jumped up right off of that bench, and she got into Andre's face. No more, she says. Stop yelling at my sister, she says. All kinds of explicitives just flying out, fast and fury. You stop talking to her. And then the next thing you see is semi-form of fisticuffs going on. Then that's when Elizabeth decides that she's going to step up and try to keep her sister off of Andre, the brute. And then Becky really just lets them have it. She says, look, you don't care about anybody else. And then she turns to Elizabeth and says that he doesn't even care about you. And I'm going to have to say that to some extent, she's right about that. And here's the reason why I feel that, because this is just my opinion. Family is family, right? Your immediate family. When you bring someone into the family who is causing as much dissension as Andre's caused, there's a problem with you enabling that type of conversation. Now, if you have some pressing issues with past encounters with your sisters, maybe they took your doll when you were younger, maybe they didn't play with you enough, maybe they made fun of you, I don't know. But you choose to use whatever is going on to exact your vengeance, that's a problem. Now, I don't know if that's really what Elizabeth's doing, but it just seems really odd to me that she sits by and allows Andre to say the amount of things that he says to the family members there. I don't care about Jen and Becky's responses to the insane things that are always said to them. I don't care about that. This is their reaction, whether you like it or not. And I think that Andre seems to feel that the constant berating and rough talk is going to get him where he needs to get to. And if it doesn't get him to where he needs to get to, after he's done with his tantrum throwing, then he just cuts you off. As if that's some great despair for you to be cut off by Andre. So at this point, everything is pretty much in a full meltdown. We still don't really know exactly what was supposed to happen in this conversation. We can only assume what was going to happen. But when you throw a stick of dynamite into the mix, what on earth do you expect? So I'm thinking in this moment, Andre really could have stayed home. I think that Becky and Jen and Elizabeth should have their conversation alone. They should hash out their issues alone. Now, if Elizabeth wants to share how she feels about certain things in regards to her sisters with her husband, she can most certainly do that. And I don't have a problem with Andre feeling a sense of protectiveness about Elizabeth. What I have a problem with is the constant berating and nastiness that he spews, whether in front of their face or not. As if somebody owes him something. You know, it's interesting because I look at their ages and I could have sworn they were a lot younger than how old they are. Because it just doesn't make any sense to be this animated all the time. But hey, it makes great TV. And we're here for it, aren't we? We're here for it. At least some of us are anyways. I am. You know, because sometimes I need a relaxing moment. One that I don't have to think that much anyways. And just watch the buffoonery of others. Because that's exactly what this was. Yes, that was exactly what this was. So, after the complete meltdown has now happened, Becky has a moment and she decides, I need to go ahead and self-regulate. You actually see it happening because what ends up visually being shown is that Vicky and Jen, I said Vicky, didn't I? Becky and Jen, they switch seats. So therefore, Becky's not right in front of Andre, and which doesn't bode well for Jen, but you know, Jen's not the one that was about to leap over the table and knock those rocks off. So I thought that was good strategy, you know, somewhat anyways. At least he's not in the line of sight, direct line of sight, that is. And you know, Becky is the oldest sister and she feels really bad about how things melted down. And she says, you know, look, I'm not proud of myself in this past moment here. But I had a flashback in high school where one of the sisters, I'm assuming it was Jen, because Jen was the one that Andre was yelling at the time when Becky snapped. So she reflected on the fact that she remembered that back in high school in front of the lockers, there was a girl that was trying to beat up her sister and she wasn't having none of that. And so because of all of the nonsense that Andre was doing at the table, it actually became a trigger for her and she just snapped. So she apologizes for her behavior. How gracious of Becky. Far cry better than what Andre could ever do. I don't think Andre's ever apologized in his life. He could take that lesson, couldn't he? So Becky and Jen try to calm things down, even if not for themselves, and start to focus their conversation more with Elizabeth, because that's what they were there for in the first place. And Elizabeth, you know, starts to try to talk about the reasons why she did post that announcement on Instagram. You know, Becky says, I don't understand why you did that. I don't know why you didn't think of us. Elizabeth says, I did think of you. And she still came to that conclusion as being the best situation. She said, you know, hey, we'd already talked about it, her and Andre, that is, and they wanted to have a special moment with the fathers because they both feel like they're very close to their fathers right now. And so they wanted to do this. And she was just going to talk to Becky at another time. It's in this roundabout time that we clip to Jen's confessional, and she's like, you know, I can't believe she actually did that. I can't believe that Elizabeth put this announcement out here for any Joe Schmo to see. I mean, what does this mean? Is she telling us that she really doesn't care much about us? That I'm not any more important than anybody else that just randomly walks down the street that could open up Instagram and look at your post? And in the illustrious words of Becky, I mean, that's BS. And I would have to agree with her. So it's in that moment that Becky has a bit of a break. Because there's been so much emotional tension year after year after year with this fool. Elizabeth does say, hey, look, you guys have basically not liked him from the moment he stepped off the plane. Now, I didn't see the beginning meetings between Andre and the family, but I can only imagine that they're not much different than every other meeting subsequently, where Andre takes no responsibility or accountability for his actions or things that he says and expects people to bow down at his feet. And Andre's a bit of a hard nut to crack on this one. He doesn't seem to get that that's not the way to get what you're looking for. That maybe giving a little bit of sugar and honey is always better than salt and vinegar on an open wound every time. Now, we're not going to go through all of the things that Andre has done that really just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And it does not bode well for trying to be an active participant in the family. But just know that Andre has not learned much lessons since any of those squabbles, arguments, fights. He just hasn't learned much of anything at this point. Now, the one bright, shiny spot in this whole debacle of a talk is in the confessional with Elizabeth. She shares that, look, everybody has a part to play in the demise of this family dynamic. I perked up. Because she actually said, you know what? We bear responsibility as well, myself and Andre. Finally, a breakthrough that I was looking for. Ownership and accountability for the things that you do and you say. Now, that's not to say that Becky and Jen and the rest of the family members always say the right things and, always come with an open heart of being kind all the time. But I most certainly don't think that the things that they have said and done have not been provoked in some way or another. So, Becky feels that, this rift that's continuing to happen is one of those great designs by Andre. That's his urging for that to happen. And if that is true, that is very sad. And Becky says, to Elizabeth, I don't think you even know what's happening. You wall yourself off from everybody. You wall yourself off from the people that you love. And you don't seem to know what's happening to you. I don't know either. That could be true. Or maybe Elizabeth's more of a participant in this than you know. But nevertheless, Elizabeth brings up the fact that, look, Dad and I, we talked about maybe family therapy, and she's thinking that would probably be a great idea for all of them to go. Jen then pops up and says, well, who's all invited? And Elizabeth says, well, everybody, including Charlie. Is it Charlie is on an island to himself, which is so weird to me. But anywho. Oh, and I also wanted to mention that part of the pop-off when Becky snapped was brewing throughout the conversation, also in effect because Andre had made a comment of calling her Pamela. Because see, that's Elizabeth's mother. So, Becky had said to him, what, every time I say something that you don't like, you're going to call me by someone who you don't get along with? The total disrespect that man shows to Elizabeth's family members is appalling, and it is palpable. And I don't quite understand the enabling of Elizabeth. I don't care if there's been things that have been said that you didn't really appreciate. You handle those like grown-ups. What a marvel concept. But what doesn't happen is that your partners don't jump in and disrespect your family members. It is okay for them to have an opinion. It is okay for them to protect you. It is okay for them to step in when there needs to be a stepped-in situation. But it is not okay for them to call them buffoons, crazies, followers, all that other nonsense. That's just not okay. At least not in this situation anyways. So, yeah, thought I'd mention that point as well. Because it was just a firestorm of things being bevied at them, and it just really imploded and exploded all over Andre. And I don't think he was, I think he was shocked by it. I really do. Yeah. So, you know, as things have simmered down a little bit, they're able to talk a little bit more. Becky just breaks out into tears. Jen holds her, says, please don't do that, you're going to get me started crying. Because it's emotional. And it really is such a horrible thing that Elizabeth did, in my opinion. You may think differently. And if you do, drop that in the comment section. Let's have a conversation about it. If you think that it was okay for Elizabeth to do what she did by making such a beautiful announcement of her pending bundle of joy on Instagram versus telling her sisters, who she had always been close to prior to. If you think that that was okay, I would love to know, because everybody may have different opinions about that. I personally don't think it was okay. And so, out of sheer frustration, I saw, and just hurt, because that's where anger usually stems from, is hurt. You know, she breaks down a little bit in tears. Then Elizabeth decides to get up and sashay around to the table on their side and sits for the sister, because now she's finally getting it that, you know, maybe this wasn't the right move to make. And that she's sorry that she couldn't have handled things much better than what she did. She was upset and angry that they did go to her mother's, or their mother, say her mother's, their mother's birthday lunch with Charlie there in attendance. But even with that, the way she handled the situation was not the right way to handle it. So that was the second jewel that I got out of this talk. And I'm glad that it happened. Because again, accountability has to be had, has to be made. Now at this point, you're probably wondering what Andre was doing, and quite frankly, I don't know. Making faces, still trying to recover from the fact that Becky stood up to him in a way that he probably did not expect it was going to happen. They just stopped really focusing on him, which is the whole purpose of this conversation in the first place. This was not a focus for Andre. It was a focus for the sisters. And maybe the next time that Andre decides that he's going to jump into the car and get in the middle of another conversation with the sisters, he'll think twice about that and stay his raggedy behind home. Unless he wants to come and be a person who wants to build a bridge. Let's just hope that that will probably happen in later times, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. There seems to be a lot of repair that needs to be done. And we still haven't had a conversation with Pamela, the mother. Because quite frankly, one, you don't go to my birthday dinner. That's bad enough. And two, you announce that I'm about to have a grandbaby on social media and you don't talk to me first. So I'm really interested in seeing that sit down. So, you know, this disastrous conversation wraps up with at least those two jewels, which was good. And maybe the hopes that they'll be able to do the counseling, and we'll just have to see how things go. So we're on hold until then. And that basically wraps up today's video and focus on Elizabeth and Andre. So of course, you know, I would love to know your thoughts. If you watched, if you are watching, what do you think about that whole entire debacle that was a talk that was supposed to be meant for the sisters? Do you think Andre should have won? Do you think that Elizabeth didn't have the capability of going on her own? Drop that down in the comment section. I would love to know your thoughts on that. Do you think there's any hope for this family? Do you think, I might have asked this one before, but now that you've seen this fight, if you will, do you think that therapy is going to be effective, or do you think that Becky already did her therapy in last night's episode? I don't know. We'll see. But go ahead and drop those comments down below. I would love to know what your thoughts are so we can have a conversation about it. And yeah, I am so excited you were here to chill out with me for a little bit while we discussed the horrible talk between the sisters. But hey, there were some breakthroughs, and so we keep hope alive for their family dynamic. I can't wait to the tell-all. Because you know sometimes things happen in the tell-all that you don't really necessarily know about, but it's been brewing, and then it just gets all crazy and chaotic. And I'm just really interested to see how that works out. And do you think Pamela's going to come back on the show this season? I'm here for that conversation too, and her explanation for that. So yeah, I think with that, I'm going to bid you adieu, and I hope for you to have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for tuning in. And again, if you're new here, I hope that you will subscribe, be a part of the family. And if you enjoyed the conversation, I truly do hope that you will give this video a like, because it does help my video and it helps my channel. And I would so appreciate it. So with that, I think that I will ta-ta for now, and I'll see you next time. Bye.